Welcome to r/Reddit Revenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. Thank you friends for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. The first story. Fed up with an overbearing micromanager at a daycare job, an employee orchestrated a perfectly timed resignation and thwarted her boss's attempt to manipulate her into working on her last day. The second story. Colleague tried to steal commissions, but the diligent part-timer exposed her scheme. The third story. Promising young employee faces a racist boss, a terrible work environment, and decides to quit, leaving the boss in a frenzy. And the first story is petty revenge on a micromanager. So this happened about 10 years ago. So before anyone asks, I don't still have the photo or texts. Not that the photo would have been great anyway. I had a sidekick back then. Great for the time, SH nowadays. I used to work in a daycare. I loved the job. I liked all the coworkers. I liked the kids. Though there is this one terror that I still have random dreams where I wake up yelling his name. They worked with my school hours, paid me $10 an hour, and I played with kids all day. It was a pretty sweet deal for a newlywed in college. Anyway, the hiring manager was promoted, so they sent a replacement. The new manager was a bee. We actually all called her Applebee's behind her back because she always dressed like you'd expect to see her working at an Applebee's. Think Jennifer Aniston's work uniform in Office Space. She was a massive micromanager. One time, I parked in the parking lot 10 minutes before my shift because I was on the phone. I clocked in just as the time clock ticked over to 8:01 a.m. Guess who got chewed out for 10 minutes for being a minute late, but able to talk in the parking lot? She was an SH boss. She actually fired a woman because she took a step out of her room to yell to the kitchen that she needed milk. For reference, the kitchen and that room shared a wall. The kids were in first grade. We're not talking about someone leaving a room full of toddlers unattended, which is exactly what the boss was busted doing 2 weeks after she fired the other teacher. Not only that, but she left the 1-year-old room completely unattended for 15 minutes before she realized it. I called the anonymous employee hotline. The DM and her called every teacher to a meeting after hours and screamed at us for 2 hours. 2 hours that we weren't paid for because she made us add 7 minutes to our lunch break every day that week to make up for it. We were told we weren't allowed to leave our rooms, but she was different because she was in charge. Never mind that the state would have shut us down. She'd give bathroom breaks but would wait 2 hours after you asked for one. One day I literally peed in my classroom's kids' bathroom because I didn't want to go in my pants. Then she tried to write me up for it. She would break several labor laws. She tried to tell us that we had to be in the building 10 minutes before and after each shift, but couldn't clock in. Not until 7 minutes, and not 1 minute sooner, before our shift, and 7 minutes after. We were still expected to stay the other 3. She did it that way because the way the time clock worked, you were paid for the next 15 minutes after 7 minutes. So if you clocked out at 8:05, you were paid until 8. If you clocked out at 8:08, you were paid until 8:15. This went on for a lot of stuff. Well, I was just peeved enough that I started calling the labor board and getting our rights. I frequently taped them around staff areas. If you needed time off or needed some kind of supplies, she'd agree, but then do what she wanted anyway. And if you asked about the conversation, she'd say, "Did you submit it in writing? Did I sign it?" Then it didn't happen. One of the teachers had to find someone to cover her entire 2-week vacation that she was getting married on because of that effing bee. Well, after she'd been there about 10 months to a year, I got so sick of her SH. I started looking for a job. I had planned on staying there until I finished school, but I was beginning to hate my job so much I was afraid I'd end up hating kids too. So I found a job. Took me about 2 weeks. It was awesome. They were willing to work with my school schedule. I was going to do data entry in an office all day. No kids, no manual labor of any kind. I was even getting paid $15 an hour. I got the phone call between classes on a Monday and went and printed out a letter of resignation. When I quit, I walked in the door and handed her my letter. She tried to put it on her desk. I made her read it and sign it. Then I took a pic of it on her desk. No way in hell was I letting her screw me in some way. Since I was so done, I put in 2 weeks, no more, no less. That meant my last day was a Monday. Well, it was Halloween. The daycare was having a kids' night to celebrate, the weekend after my last day. Games, music, a bit of food, nothing terribly fancy, just something for the younger kids to do without being out late. The morning of my last day, Daycare B called me and told me I had to be at work for that event on a Friday night. See, her kids had a school event, and she wanted to go with her husband and kids to that. I was quitting. All the other teachers had signed up for booths, and I was the only person. So of course I said I'd do it. Spoiler alert, I didn't go. I started getting phone calls from her about not being there and how I was fired. I told her I had quit and she could fire me all she liked. This just made her more angry. So I did the only thing I could. I texted her a picture of my resignation letter and said, Did you submit that in writing to me? Did I sign it? Then it didn't happen. I never heard another peep from her. Former coworkers said she showed up and tried talking SH about me to some of the parents. They already knew she was full of SH and tactfully told her so. Kids all had a blast. In reality, she didn't have to be there. She was convinced that every station needed 2 to 3 teachers. There were so many there that a lot of them ended up just standing around visiting during the carnival. Your ingenuity in fighting injustice and your sensual humor are incredible. From the nickname Applebee's to the photo of the dismissal on her desk, it was a true art to respond to her micromanagement. You've also created a legend that is unlikely to be forgotten. Your persistence in defending your rights and those of your colleagues is also impressive. Even the way you used the law and spread the word about employees' rights throughout the institution helped you win this fight. And of course, your final response when they tried to fire you is simply exquisite. Did you put this in writing to me? Did I sign it? Then it didn't happen. This approach to the case with sarcastic humor is a great way to make this story memorable. Your story inspires us to always stand up for our rights and not allow excessive control. The second story is, full-time receptionist tried to jack my commissions when I worked as a part-time receptionist. I worked as a part-time receptionist at a car dealership to keep afloat, while I looked for jobs in my field. I worked alongside a horrible full-time receptionist. The receptionist was good at her job, but was terrible with computers and terrible to others. At the dealership, we had this commission system. 1. Receive a phone call, enter data into Excel sheet equals $1. 2. The person comes into the dealership equals $1 plus $5. 3. The person ends up buying a vehicle equals $1 plus $5 plus $10. She started jacking my calls and changing my name to hers in Excel. Sometimes a client who had called me first would call again, and she'd write that as a new entry and delete mine. I started locking the cells in the Excel files that had my name. She was furious, tried to pin it on me trying to hijack her calls. She went to the GM and argued that I'm making Excel files different, and it is not allowing her to do her job. I convinced the GM that the old way is causing a lot of discrepancy, and reminded him of an audit coming up soon. He told me to teach her how to use the new Excel sheets and updated him on all the discrepancies I see. Since this was an audit, and it was an audit that was supposed to be for the past year, I dug up all the previous sales call logs. Many entries written twice, thrice, and even 4 times. Same entries but different months. We had another portal where the customer's information was put in by the sales guys, and I spent hours looking for canceled deals, no-shows, wrongfully entered data. The customer sells their car instead of buying one, etc. It didn't matter that I ended up finding 2 of my own entries as canceled deals, which I couldn't have known since I only worked evening. The GM sees the amount of work I put in, and my honesty, and gives me a $500 vanilla rewards card as bonus, and makes it a new rule to check Excel sheets at the end of the month with the information on the portal. Turns out she had been paid close to $8K extra throughout the year. I emailed the Excel sheets to the GM and resigned the very next day, as I had found a job much closer to my own field. From what I heard, they stopped the commission indefinitely for her, but not for the new part-time receptionist. I put in a password on the Excel sheet before I left. The password you enter each time you open the Excel file is call stealer. It looks like your dealership is quick to draw graphs, not unlike the way you graph your sources in Excel. But your ability to close the cells with your name on them added a touch of comedy to this commission drama. Sometimes you need to close the door on closed people. It's clear that you didn't want to be a passive participant in this eccentric Excel game. You became a true accounting hero who stood up for what was right and put an end to Excel-style heists. If this story became dear to your heart, you could release a funny book bestseller called The World Encrusted with Commissions, the story of an Excel hero. Leave this mix in Excel and move on to a new career where you can ensure that no one steals your well-deserved income. And don't forget to memorize the password call stealer. It can become a symbol of your courage in the fight against countless Excel cells. The last story is, boss decides to bite the hand that feeds him. So to start off, we need a backstory. I was the youngest CADD, computer-aided drafting and design guy to ever work for this specific company. I was currently finishing up my associate's degree, while also working full-time for this company. I was told that after I finished my degree, I would be given a very generous raise, pending I was still with the company. This should have been the first red flag. Things went great for the first few months. It was only me, another designer, and my boss. I even passed a certification test, making me an ADDA certified mechanical designer. I'm a fast learner, and I picked up the tasks and jobs that were assigned to me very fast. So I was given even more responsibilities due to the lack of individuals in our group. So after about a year on the job, I was brought on full-time with benefits, even though it took them 2 months after promoting me to give me any sort of paperwork or documentation stating I was promoted. Now, enter the interns. We started taking on interns to help with some of the workload. Basically, my boss was looking for another me. And to his surprise, every single person he brought in was a complete idiot. This went on for about a year, and 5 interns later, we were back to the 3 musketeers of drafting. We were probably working 60 plus hours a week to keep up with the workload. When lo and behold, my boss decided to incorporate a whole other division of the company into our design group, document control. Now, we needed to hire an individual who could do document control and some small CAD work on the side whenever he had the time. So I told my boss that I knew a perfect individual who would need a little training, just like I did, but could be brought up to speed very fast. So I get him an interview and he gets the job. Now, the person I got the job is a African, half black, half white, and honestly, he's one of my best friends. He's also the whitest black person you'll ever meet. Now, I was unaware of this at the time, but my boss was a complete racist and wouldn't give the new guy any time of day. My boss would pull me and the other designer into a conference room and complain about how my friend was, and how stupid and ignorant and so on about 3 to 4 times a week. This put me in a horrible position where I had to just agree with my boss, so that he would get over it and move on and let us get back to work. Eventually, my boss would only invite the other designer and myself out to lunch, just to be about the guy every day. Also, my boss always made me drive him out to lunch and usually made me pay for his lunch, but that's a whole other matter. Eventually, my friend got tired of his boss's antics and decided he wasn't going to put up with it anymore. He put in his 2 weeks notice, and my boss decided to make the next 2 weeks the worst weeks of his life. My friend told me thanks for getting him the job. He didn't blame me for the way the boss was treating him, and told our boss to F off and left the same day he put in his 2 weeks notice. Now my boss decides to turn on me, to blame me for picking this individual, to tell me that I have to work unlimited overtime to make up my work and his work. I say okay and proceed to call out sick for the next 2 days. I turned my phone off so that he couldn't call me, and went into the office after it closed on the second sick day. Dropped off my letter of resignation, my door badge, my keys, and any other item I thought he wanted. Never heard from him since. However, a mutual friend of mine and the guy who left right before me who worked at the company said the next day was hysterical. My boss threw his monitor through a wall after reading my email to look under his keyboard for my resignation, and pretty much lost his mind. After a couple months, he's now the most calm-minded individual and doesn't interact or say anything to anyone. Don't F with the people who make your life easy. Your boss has obviously decided to get back at you and your friend for your work. Your agility in answering, especially when you decided to refuse the unlimited hours, is a masterpiece. But the moment when you quit your job and sent your resignation under the boss's mattress is really funny. Remove this character from the buffet, and he's turned into the most calm person who ignores everyone. Remember, don't play with people who make your life easier. Thank you for your likes, comments, and subscriptions. I really appreciate it.